Hello and welcome to the GXM podcast, where we explore news and topics around video game music and the intersection between the games and music industries. We aim to publish fortnightly, so please be sure to subscribe. Please share this with other people in the industry, people who you think might be interested, and definitely, again, smash that subscribe button. Joining me, Tom Quillfeldt, is my co-host Mat Ombler, Head of Gaming Partnerships at Laced, and I am Community Manager and A&R at Laced as well. Matt, it's been a while since we spoke. I have been off to different countries and my brain has been blasted apart by family holidays. How are you faring?
You've had all the fun. I am in the middle of a stressful house move that we almost didn't think was going to happen. Dealing with that while also having a very pregnant wife who is about to deliver our baby boy in 9 weeks, on top of a lot of work. It's been very much all work, no play, and certainly no Disney at the moment. So I am very envious.
Oh, mate, I've had so much Disney, and that's going to form the basis of the topic later, just because after a marathon of Disney film watching with my family over the beginning of summer holiday, we went to Disneyland Paris, which we were very, very fortunate to do. It is an ordeal for parents, especially in 30-degree heat. There's a lot of walking, but there's also a lot of music. And later on, we're going to have a chat about, well, you're going to basically pick my brain about music design in the largest theme park in Europe. You know, where is there music? Why is there music? And where can you escape from the music? So we'll get to that later.
Can you escape from the music?
Can you escape from the music? Not in many places. Spoiler alert. But first, we're going to get on to the news. Okay, Matt, last time, I can't remember if it was last time or the episode before, we talked about the possibilities of Skate's dynamic soundtrack. That was one of our news items about sort of possibility of it being a dynamic thing, and I wondered whether that was going to be licensed music. You were thinking, oh, is that going to be like programmatic commission music? And I think people are already getting excited. Fans are already getting excited about the possibility of a new skating game made by a company, EA, who is incredibly familiar now with crafting great soundtracks and licensing music into games. So this piece is via The Gamer. Break it down for me.
So it is essentially the Skate social channels reshared the same video that we were talking about last time, which led onto our chat around dynamic music. The Gamer put out a new piece basically profiling the fact that I think it was more of a clever marketing and social thing in terms of the guys there asking for music submissions, saying we want to hear from you, we want to hear from anyone who's got strong thoughts about what music you want in this game. Let's be honest, saying that as a music supervisor or an audio director or whatever else on a game like Skate is opening the floodgates. Do you know what I mean? Like, you only have to look at the engagement on the gamer's tweet to see people saying, I want this band, I want that band, and I want that band. But I have got some cool stuff to add that builds on the chat we had last time about this whole idea of a dynamic soundtrack being based around licensed music. I reached out to a couple of our friends, a couple of video game composers, just to say, right, when we talk about dynamic music in video games, we're normally talking about a video game score, and that's been written in such a way that it can be dynamic, it can adapt. How could that apply to licensed music? Do you know what I mean? Because that's when we're getting into the territory of stems potentially, and with that comes a massive nightmare of licensing issues. To share some brief thoughts, they basically said in the case of Skate, they think it's more going to be the soundtrack will evolve over time in terms of tracks being swapped out in terms of who's listening to what inside the game. Because EA will have data showing how popular certain tracks are within the game. So technically, if they want, they can see a certain genre of music is proving really popular with players, add more tracks that are maybe punk rock or metal, get rid of some rap songs and hip hop or whatever else. Alternatively, they can lock certain music genres to certain areas of the map. So you could go downtown in the map, there could be a rap and hip hop area, maybe there's like some diegetic music there. Likewise, you could maybe go to another part of the map where there's a music venue playing heavy metal music and stuff like that. The thing that is also possible but unlikely is, did you ever play SSX Tricky?
No.
Right, so that's got a really cool thing. Do you know like how sometimes when you pull off a move in a video game and you'll get like a sound effect or whatever else?
Mm-hmm.
SSX had that thing where it builds up and you hear like tricky, tricky every time like you build up your tricky gauge and land these like special moves which are harder to pull off. And eventually Get Tricky starts playing. So the guys I spoke to were basically saying they could technically, if they wanted to, depending on if they've got stems or not, do things around certain skateboarding moves where music plays if you pull off a certain skateboarding move or reacts in a certain way. Someone else said they could be working with a company like Reactional, which claims to have licensed music that can adapt over time. They could have that kind of software in-house at EA. Like, we don't know. I just think it's super exciting that a company like EA, which when we talk about licensed soundtracks, you know, they've got FIFA, they've got NHL, they've got NBA. Like, these guys are the kings of licensed music. So thinking they can take that reputation that they've built for themselves, but then start messing with these songs and playing with them and doing something new that potentially has not been seen before is super exciting.
Yeah. Hopefully it will be a very interesting case study, and we'll be talking about it and thinking about it alongside GTA 6 as well, which will be a whole similar but different kettle of fish in terms of the potential for tracks to come in and out and the licensing team to react and patch stuff in and patch stuff out and, I don't know, build artist partnerships around that. And the sky's the limit, and EA and Rockstar are two of the cutting edge video game companies that are so experienced with this stuff that, we look forward to what they're going to do next.
We're just going to need a dedicated section, I think, when GTA comes out. Like, how are we even going to have the manpower to, you know what I mean? There's going to be so much stuff to talk about music-wise for GTA 6.
Yes, it's going to take a while to digest it all, I think. Going to have a sort of multi-part thing looking at it. I noticed that the company, the developer and publisher behind the Persona games, Shin Megami Tensei, Atlas, who have some of the kind of the hottest soundtracks, I would say, in terms of games that have broken out of Japan and got a global appeal now, especially the Persona games. They've put a lot of their soundtracks on streaming services, in contrast to, say, someone like Nintendo, for instance. And they've launched an official music website for their games. Is this the same or different to... I think it's Bandai Namco Music was the last one we saw launched. Ubisoft Music have had a kind of an in-house music group for a long time now. Yeah, so what's going on with this Atlas thing?
So they've called themselves a sound label, and it's worth pointing out that the website is in Japanese and it's automatically getting translated to English for me, so that game sound label could be just a mistranslation. But if it is true, and Atlas does technically now have a publishing arm putting its music out there, that's super exciting. But I think it follows on from the stuff that we've talking about on previous episodes, you know, about the fact that they had Shin Megami Tensei doing this collaboration with Slipknot, and also had booths at Download Festival. And like you were saying, the music for their IP is so incredibly popular, but let's be honest, in comparison to other companies like Riot or even like EA and Activision, they've not done much on the collaborations and partnerships front, but they've also not done much just in terms of wider music things. Do you know what I mean? I think there's been a couple of concerts. I think there's been a Persona concert. So this, to me, is Atlas saying, all right, cool, we recognize like the demand and the value of our music. We're going to start doing more. This could be the first steps of them really starting to launch some cool initiatives, similar to what we've seen for the recent Slipknot, Shin Megami stuff. Hopefully more of that to come.
Yeah, and they've got a new game out this year, Metaphor Refantasio, which is a new IP for them, fantasy RPG IP. And then I guess you could say this was them moving pieces into place for Persona 6 potentially to just be a massive, global hit, including the music and all the possibilities around that. So, yeah, exciting times, and we will keep reporting on it, basically. One of the last standing video game media sites, Polygon, has embarked on quite an ambitious kind of series of video game music pieces called Polygon FM from all different types of contributors. There's loads there. I've checked out a couple of these. Matt, what are some of your favourite pieces from this Polygon FM?
There are so many for a weekly feature. Like, this is a really good collection of articles. I think my favourite ones are, there is a very niche, a very Mat Ombler story about a Malcolm X sample that somehow made its way into a Sonic game, Sonic Rush. That's worth reading just to check out how it happened and why it's in there. Like, this is a quote from Malcolm X that's been sampled in a Sonic soundtrack. Like, it's absolutely wild. Not a lot of people know that. Again, on niche weirder stuff, you can probably imagine I was a very big fan of the weirdest video games based on bands. Shout out to the On Rails Iron Maiden shooter on the PlayStation and loads of other games which might sound good but are really not worth playing. But I think if you're going to read any of them, I would highly recommend reading a piece called Can Fortnite Make Plastic Instruments Cool Again? It's a really good exploration of the rise and demise of the rhythm game genre, the recent launch of Fortnite Festival, and what that means for the wider businesses like who specialised in making these instruments. Because you've got to remember, like, the same way you've got all of these third-party companies that make controllers and stuff, do you know what I mean? It's a huge business. And there was a lot of these companies making guitar peripherals for Rock Band and for Guitar Hero. And when that industry collapsed, a lot of these like third-party controller manufacturers, they crashed too with it because that demand just went. So there's some really cool quotes in there from PDP who've put out the Riffmaster guitar, which is basically the go-to guitar now for Fortnite Festival. You can either use that or you can use some of the old Rock Band 4 guitars, but they're averaging like 100 quid, 110 quid for these Rock Band 4 controllers, which I think at one point were like 20 or 30 quid in charity shops and cash converters. Do you know what I mean? So the prices have all shot up now because Fortnite Festival's taken off. And I think that the idea I got from the piece was like manufacturers are ready for this, because if Fortnite Festival does take off, and it looks like it is doing, because the PDP guitars are sold out everywhere. Like, if you want to buy one, you've got to go on pre-order. I just got one from the game collection, I think, which I thought was going to be an instant purchase. It'll arrive the next day, but not apparently for another couple of months. But there's still a lot of caution around. We don't want to put too much money into making these things yet, because what if we just have a repeat where the hype dies off and then all of a sudden we're left with these, let's be honest, pieces of plastic that just happen to have connectivity. Do you know what I mean?
It definitely doesn't feel like it's an absolute shoe-in. And I guess it kind of relies on a meme moment, or a particular track creating a lot of buzz, or just some viral thing that you can't quite manufacture, but you pray to God happens to kind of boost the noise around a particular game or gaming experience.
I think there's a lot of people that still aren't aware that Fortnite Festival's out there. Do you know what I mean? Like, outside of the big Fortnite players. I
mean, it was part of a big kind of three-pronged approach with the racing, the rocket race. I can't remember and then obviously the Lego Minecraft survival mode as well. And doing them all at the same time possibly cannibalized.
Yeah, I think potentially
some of the attention and news, but people should definitely check out that article. I just wanted to shout out an article from a different site. There's so many. You were doing your news roundup. You do your spreadsheet behind the scenes. And boy, was it full of some great stuff since we last spoke. I just wanted to shout out Jack Yarwood's time extension piece on Snake Eater, the kind of Bond-ish song from Metal Gear Solid 3. Not only did he, get hold of the singer and the composer, but also the orchestrator and I think the orchestral booker as well or something. He sort of went all the way down to get the story behind it. I guess the only people he didn't manage to speak to were Hideo Kojima, obviously important people to do with that song and those soundtracks and that period of time. But very interesting piece.
I do not know how he manages to track down some of these people. Do you know what I mean? I think time extension in general is just worth shouting out because some of the stories that they do, which is mainly Jack, do you know, I don't know how this guy does so many stories, but some of the people he speaks to and finds is just absolutely wild. And again, so many niche or underground stories as well on there, which just brilliant.
Jack, we see you, we love you, keep going.
We salute you, keep going. And like you said, so many news stories in the past week. We've got some more that we're just going to run through now in brief. A couple of collaborations, as you'd expect. I don't think we ever recorded. It's quite interesting, actually. We never sit down and record an episode where there's not been a collaboration, and it never used to be that case.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's just expected. So one of the latest ones is Norwegian DJ and producer Alan Walker, who is literally one of the biggest EDM DJs in the world. He launched a collaboration with Rocket League for its Neon Nights in-game festival, where players could get their hands on Alan Walker-themed decals, new music from the DJ, and loads of other cosmetics. Roblox has hit the very impressive milestone of 10 million concurrent users. That's 10 million people all online at once. That comes from the data platform Offpath. Tom, do you want to run through the rest, considering there's a lovely little song on there that you enjoyed?
Matt, you had on your sheet a piece about all of the K-pop collaborations, the best of them so far, and how basically none of them come close to Pop Stars by KDA. From League of Legends all those years ago now. But I did like one of the Valorant ones I thought was very cool. But this latest partnership, Odatari releases a new song with Valorant. Odatari has, well over 2.5 million followers on YouTube. He's a sort of rapper, singer, electronic music type. It's not to my tastes, I will say. I don't like it as much as the previous Valorant one. I respect that the game has, more of an edge, more of a violent edge in some ways than something like League of Legends, so they can go more aggressive with the sound of these collaborations. But for me, it doesn't feel like a hit. But what do I know? It's not my genre. There's a company called Hybe Interactive Media who has raised $80 million for publishing operations. Matt, what do Hybe do?
Hybe are best known as the management company for BTS and basically a lot of the other biggest K-pop groups in the world. So Hybe Interactive Media, is basically their gaming branch. So they've got a couple of games out, as you might expect. They've got a game based on BTS called BTS Island in the Seom. They've also got a game called Rhythm Hive, which is basically just a rhythm game based around loads of their artists. And they recently launched a new mobile RPG called Astra Knights of Vader, co-developed by Flint. If you're interested in learning more about this, there is an additional write-up from Music Business Worldwide, who basically analyse the wider implications of the investment and make some comparisons to Sony's cross-media strategy and the fact that Sony artists have been appearing in more PlayStation games. So they talk about what this could mean for Hybe and Hybe's games. It's a really great piece. It's a very lengthy piece, but it's got a really interesting Q&A at the end from a recent investment Q&A with some questions from shareholders, so I'd recommend reading that.
I noticed, I just looked up Astra Knights of Vader, has a mixed reception on Steam, pretty low reviews and not too many of them as things go. So yeah, it remains to be seen that these these games made by companies for a sort of, I guess, as part of a marketing mix, it must be quite difficult to, I don't know, put enough investment in and give the developers enough time to make something that's got legs, just an observation there. There's a music game company called Amanotes. I think probably their best known game is Magic Tiles 3. And they have something, is it a contest for independent artists to be part of their games? Is that right?
Yeah, I think this was done to celebrate a recent anniversary, but they've recently launched a contest. It's a music submission contest where the requirements are you need to be an independent artist. So the winner will receive a $1,000 prize and get their music in the game, while 2 runner-ups will receive a $500 prize each and a month subscription to the game.
Okay, we're going to get onto the topic now. So, Matt, I was very lucky / suffering mixed fortunes because of hot weather to accompany my family to Disneyland Paris for a few days where it was 30-degree heat and merciless with it, but we had a lot of fun. It's a heck of a tiring trip because you walk so much. There's so much walking to do, back and forth and back and forth. But as I was doing so, I took some field recordings on my phone, actually, of just so many places that music is playing in Disneyland Paris. And it got me thinking quite carefully about music design, because there's different places around the park, different events and things that remind one of a very designed experience like you would get in a video game, where a player is going to go down a particular path and you can prepare a musical response or surprise for them. And with stems and adaptive music, of course, you can also tailor things a little bit to make the experience seem more interactive. Zooming out, Disney's one of the biggest media companies in the world in terms of, owned IP. They own Star Wars, they own Marvel, they own Pixar, and no slouch with their own Disney output as well in terms of, blockbuster films. They've just scored the biggest animated film opening with Inside Out 2. So, this Pixar have kind of come roaring back and taken the crown, I think, from Super Mario Brothers movie, which is very interesting. They know that music is a core part of the experience of a Disney property. Interestingly, having brought on Star Wars and having brought on Marvel, arguably music more important to Star Wars, given John Williams' legacy, than it is to Marvel, where despite some really recognisable themes like the Avengers theme by Alan Silvestri, generally speaking, I think people have felt like the Marvel films haven't had the strongest or most memorable kind of scores. But of course, everybody remembers Aladdin, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, and so on and so forth. So it's no surprise really that it would form a big part of the Disneyland experience. But yeah, you get off the train and you start walking up to the main, this huge ostentatious pink hotel that's at the entrance, and straight away they've got speakers hiding in the bushes like ninjas, like oral ninjas, to just assault your ears with very lush romantic music from the most, I'd say, wistful parts of the Disney catalogue, to kind of give people turning up, so your first entrance into the park, you're just reminded of the magic of Disney. And it's exactly like when you watch a Disney film now, you get the CG of the castle and the river and the magic and the glistening and everything like that.
We're Scott, it's 5 people waiting. So we don't shop on because it's not. But they presumably at some point.
They've tried to replicate that in real life. Obviously, they can't control whether your 5-year-old is screaming at you for ice cream and, you're dropping your shoulder bag and spilling sun cream lotion and someone's trying to feed a 1-year-old baby next to you and it's all chaotic, fun for the family. They just assault you with, the most tuneful stuff. And it does. It just doesn't really stop after that.
What kind of stuff was playing then? Is this all eras of Disney? Is it the stuff that kids are going to resonate with most? Like, is it just like the Disney bangers, if you would? Like,
yeah, it's an interesting mix actually. So there's so much music all over the park that I would guess that there's a full-time music team somewhere who are editing different music cues from the films, who are commissioning instrumental arrangements of some of the tunes, because for the most part it's not the sung music, it's all instrumental, and even where it's a famous Disney song, it's still an instrumental version. Then by area of the park, it's mixed up by genre of music. So as you enter the park proper, there's this kind of old-timey Bioshock Infinite 1910s World Fair kind of American vibe. And they've got old-timey ragtime and jazz and stuff. And some of that, as far as I could tell, was still Disney IP, music from the Disney catalogue, but redone in a jaunty way. And that continues throughout all the different zones, if you like. There's Adventureland and Frontierland and Fantasyland and stuff. When you're walking past the Pinocchio bit that's ostensibly, I guess, Switzerland, 19th century Switzerland or something like that, and they've got harmonium and accordion music, and you're just trying to just eat your German sausage and chips, and you're just it's just never quiet when you're in the actual park itself. And then for the parades, I guess the parades and the rides is where they're not just trying to background the music, they're trying to smash you in the face with it. So the parades are these huge choreographed things where these massive floats come out with a sort of different film property per float, more or less. And lots of people dancing in the Disney costumes. That they kind of stuck to four to the floor, kind of a quite aggressive kind of disco pop. But what was really interesting about it is, so there's speakers just everywhere, just these Bose labelled speakers, these sort of big fat round things in every plant pot everywhere. So when you're watching the parade, there's the constant of the kind of four to the floor beat. And then interesting is, as different floats come past, it might be like the Frozen float with Elsa on the top of it. And so they'll have music from the Frozen films synced up. There'll be a specific arrangement of it where they can fit some Frozen themes over that four to the floor beat, and it fits in perfectly. And then the interesting thing is, as that float goes off into the distance, that part, those stems will die down, and then another float will come along with a different part of the music. So whoever has designed that, they've had to take into account, obviously, the audio delay from different speakers, you hearing different audio bouncing off different parts and buildings and stuff. And they've had to think about your music experience wherever you're standing. So in that sense, it feels very video gamey. There must be a strong designing hand behind how that stuff works. And it must be digitally synced. They must have some kind of music system and metronome running in the background for the dance and stuff like that. It's pretty crazy. One of the other big events is the illumination, the sort of last thing at night when they do this amazing drone light show, and then they project loads of stuff onto the main castle. And I swear to God, Matt, you would not believe how similar to Nobuo Uematsu's Gold Saucer piece this music was. Because you know the gold saucer music's like, again, it's like 4 to the floor. It's like da 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 da, and there's all these contrapuntal parts. Almost exactly the same kind of cue. And then again, they bring different film themes in and out over the top of that. The constant tempo to fit things in and out, piece, Disney content in and out. But it's kind of overwhelming as a visitor. There's nowhere you can go without music playing, and then sometimes different music clashing depending on where you are from different, rides and things.
So what other video game elements did it remind you of? Because obviously, we've touched on a couple already, but we're talking about Disneyland here, and for some people listening who are not necessarily into the more technical aspects of what goes into like a video game soundtrack, I might be wondering, hang on a second, why is Tom talking about Disneyland Paris on a video game music podcast? What has that got to do with it? But you've already mentioned a couple of comparisons, like Final Fantasy there, and just the idea of music having a place and a purpose. What other video gamey things did you pick out while you were there?
The musical experience of going into an arcade?
Yeah.
Have you ever been in the Jurassic Park cabinets or something where you're actually sitting in this...
consumed by music.
And dialogue, and that's what the ride music is like. So there was a Star Wars one called Star Tours, which was like a 3D thing where they push you around in this big unit with loads of other people, made me feel properly queasy. Someone had created a bespoke piece for it, but it was still using the John Williams themes, but it was mashing them together in that kind of hyper intense way that those big arcade cabinets do, with just random spoken dialogue coming in from all over the shop. To be fair, it was in French, so that made the experience more kind of overwhelming. So imagine going to a French arcade or something, and sitting in one of those big cabs. But you go to the arcades and you put your pound into a big arcade machine, and it's kind of really intense, and 2.5 minutes later you're dead, and that's it. The kind of sound carries on, and you walk away slightly disappointed, but also thrilled to have had that arcade experience. And the rides just kind of push that to 11. But it's so overwhelming. I was in the Hyperspace Mountain, which is pitch black. You do corkscrew loop-de-loops upside down and stuff. And there's just C-3PO in French bleating away in your right ear, and just orchestral music coming from nowhere in particular. And then you're being hurled around upside down, and then you're just chucked off. And the whole experience is just so... it's just so overwhelming. I don't think games tend to do that, like console games or normal video games tend to do that. I think it's something you only get. A sound designer, music composer for an arcade game would know what they were going for in that kind of assault on your senses. And then they had music playing in a lot of the queues. So if you're in an Avengers ride, they've got some kind of looped Avengers stuff playing that kind of sounds like the Avengers if it's not one of the actual film queues. And then because the queues can be hugely long, they normally have for some of the more technical rides, they have a robot of Iron Man talking you through the adventure you're about to go on or whatever, and there'll be a bespoke piece of music there, lots of sound design, lots of dialogue recorded especially for it. And so, you're just always cushioned by music. And I can't say that it's a good thing particularly. I don't know, because it makes even some of these amazing, memorable pieces of score music into just muzak. Because, and especially when you're on your sort of third day in the park and you're a bit tired and you're a bit hot, hearing the same Incredibles 2 cue as you're leaving the park down one of the side paths starts to really, really get on your nerves. Like, I don't know why I think they've done this in the past. They've made like a video game version of a Disney park. I think it might have been on the Xbox 360 or something.
They did that with Universal as well on the N64, which is apparently one of like the worst games on the N64. I guess it's tapping into that theme park world thing where these kind of simulators were quite popular for a while, weren't they?
Yeah. When we got back, I was sitting down doing some work. I could hear my kids playing a noisy video game in the other room. I think it was Ni no Kuni 2 or something, which has a lot of music in it. And that music is quite attractive. Like, it makes you hear it from the other room and you think, oh, what part of the game is that? Oh, is he in a battle? And the park works a bit like that as well. So, for instance, there's this Alice in Wonderland labyrinth, and there's different music cues coming from different parts of the labyrinth. Not only does it draw you to the ride in the first place, but then it draws you through those attractions where you're kind of walking through a particular thing. So they use music to kind of pull you in and guide you as well. So it works very well in its intended purpose. But if you are crouched in a pool of shadow waiting for your wife to get ice cream in 30-degree heat, and you hear all of those music cues at once overlapping each other and all of the families around and kids screaming and stuff, and you're just like, oh man, my ears and brain badly need a rest. So it was really nice actually to go to the park at night, and got to go back at night when it's all very dimly lit and go on some of the gnarlier roller coasters. And I think they either turned off or turned down a lot of the park music, and it was so much more pleasant.
They should have nighttime music. I'm thinking like Animal Crossing, where the music just completely changes and goes more peaceful at night. They should have done that.
I think they possibly do. I think in some of the busier, because they have a lot of families waiting around for like the final light show. I can't remember. I think they do have like very low level, like, oh, you're waiting for the thing to come.
Yeah.
Kind of music to kind of get people prepped. I mean, the park design, as we know, like Walt Disney even himself paid a lot of attention to the park design and the flow of people through it. And we saw that reflected in that Breath of the Wild GDC talk a couple of years ago, where they were talking about always having something on the horizon, like between the dips of landscape. And kind of that very, very much feels like the ethos of park design. Not necessarily that exact point, but that thought process of like, well, you come out here and then you're going to see that over there and you're going to be drawn to that. And so there's going to be a toilet on the left and a shop on the right. Oh my gosh, so many shops. And interestingly, a lot of the park, they seem to follow the, it just made me think of Hitman World of Assassination. Not because I wanted to throw briefcases at people and generally get murderous, but I can't remember who it was that talked about the Swiss cheese design. I think it is Io actually, in relation to the newer Hitman, in that every area there's at least multiple entrances and exits, so you can feel like you can always pass through a place, and the more you know somewhere, the more you get familiar with it, the easier you can move in and out. And Dishonored had a bit of that design as well, with its levels where there were always multiple ways into a given level, like the party level or whatever. So because it's already video gamey and it's all very artificial like a video game, there's barely any birds, there's kind of no insects, all the plants are incredibly manicured. So actually BioShock Infinite feels a massive amount like Disneyland, and I would be surprised if the designers of that game they must have been to that kind of old-timey kind of, because it feels so much like that, and people sort of criticize BioShock Infinite for that, but I actually could kind of come to appreciate setting a horror game in that highly artificial environment. And as we know with BioShock Infinite, you get the floats with the barbershop quartet will kind of suddenly float up in front of you and give you that music moment. But throughout, I didn't see a single live musician throughout the whole park, except a couple of the singers in one of the very, very highly choreographed shows. But everything else, as far as I could tell, was completely pre-recorded.
I mean, to be fair, that could be one of two reasons. It could be one, they've got so much music already, it would be difficult fitting it in. But two, without poo-pooing on your lovely time in Paris, I believe that work conditions for Disney park employees are not the best. I don't know if this is maybe just in America and not so much in Europe, but I wonder if it's that as well, where if they're already quite low paid and then you want them to pick up instruments and do stuff. But that does seem like a missed opportunity, maybe at least from not for a full band thing, but you'd maybe expect some vocalists. I mean, you said there's like a couple, but...
There's like a tiny handful of professional singers who are like, I don't know, like Beauty from Beauty and the Beast. And so we saw one of the shows, which is this incredibly highly choreographed, highly manicured experiences where they do the same show 3 times a day and it is no expenses spared. They are incredible productions and they got, like 2 or 3 live singers and that's it. Not even the other dancers are like mic'd up to be in the chorus or anything. Honestly, it might have something to do with like, I don't know, like unionization.
Yeah, I think it could be.
Yeah, of like musicians in France or something like that. There was a big stage reserved for amateur performances from groups presumably they invite to Disneyland to perform in one of the big restaurants, but I didn't see a timetable and no one was playing while I was there. But it was very specifically for, amateur like visiting school groups or something like that. Just really interesting, a mix of never-ending music. Even in the hotel, you get back to the hotel, it's not until you get back to nearly at your room that you actually hear quiet. Even when you're waiting for a shuttle bus outside the front of your hotel, they're pumping in like gentle, massage parlour piano music. Because they just can't leave you. They just can't leave you alone for 3 seconds. Overall, I would love to hear from a music designer, a music programmer, or a sound designer who had been to a Disneyland park and had opinions, or, even better, try and find one of the actual people who are responsible for sound and audio at one of these places. You and I assume that the music team behind GTA 6 has got to be one of the biggest assembled licensed music and diegetic and music programming, original score, all the radio DJs, all of that work that has to go into a massive interactive world. But yeah, a massive real world place that is designed a little bit like a virtual space, and I'm sure they do like have virtual mock-ups when they're first considering adding a ride or element to the park. Oh, of course, Matt, it's a small world. I think there's a little like couple of like neurons in my brain or whatever that are just playing It's a Small World over and over and over and over and over and over again.
I was going to say that's turning into the stuff of nightmares now, but we're going to have to get you to do a follow-up so you can get to Nintendo World, the Nintendo theme park first.
I would be really curious. We should, I should reach out to someone who's been and ask whether they wield music in quite the same way. But as I understand it, Nintendo World, at least in Japan, is very kind of compact. And so I think there's the sheer breadth of the Disneyland Paris site means that they can have pools of music that don't always like interfere with each other, and quite well soundproof rides as well. But yeah, super interesting. Yeah, Matt, you should consider it. I hope I've sold the experience.
I will. I'm going to try and do Nintendo's on the list when baby is old enough. That'll be one of the first things we save up for, I think. So I've got a genuine excuse to go there with Liz now. I can say it's for the kid.
Yeah.
There we go.
There we go. Okay, now it's time for Done in 60 Seconds, where we take just 1 minute to recommend something to each other. I think, Matt, it's your time to go first, so hit that timer and let's go.
I love it when I get a new message on Twitter and it is from friend of the podcast, Pierre, because I know when he sends me something, it is either going to be incredible, very terrible, or just weird. This is on the incredible side. It's a song that I definitely I wouldn't have heard this otherwise. There's no way I would have checked this out. It is from Honor of Kings, a Chinese MOBA game, one of the biggest mobile games in the world, one of the biggest MOBA games in the world. Recently got a global release. This is a new song called Lam Ascension Pendekar. And if there were any fans out there, maybe you're a fan of Polyphia or Pliny or those kind of like math rock proggy bands, you are absolutely going to love this. It does not sound like something you would hear in a Chinese MOBA.
Oh, they just couldn't stay in 4/4, could they?
Of course not.
That is really, really incredible. That is genuinely enjoyable. If you'd recommended me that as just a band, just making math rock, I would have been like, yeah, that's really good, because it starts in that typical kind of overcomplicated math rock way. Like you're like, oh, guys, just pick a time signature.
and then it grooves. Then you get the groove.
But then it settles into something of a 4/4 somewhat. And it's very, very enjoyable and very musical and very listenable. I mean, is it just that one track or is Pierre recommending the whole thing or?
I think this is like for DLC, because this just seemed to be a standalone. So I don't use Spotify much, so I don't know if this is just like the way it's sent on there. But because immediately I was like, if the entire Honor of Kings soundtrack sounds like this, I need to consume all of it immediately. It doesn't.
No.
But you get this quite a lot in mobile games where, I mean, I think you've probably heard it in Genshin, where a soundtrack can have so many different genres on because of different areas of the map or different composers or whatever else. So I think this is just kind of like an outlier where it's just a really cool song.
We continue to rely on Pierre to kind of pluck out these, when it's not got farting in it, he can pluck out some real beauties.
Delivers the goods.
Okay, so as keeps happening with Laced Records digital releases that I work on, there are albums that would almost certainly have passed me by, soundtracks that I possibly wouldn't have given the time of day to. Zach Bauer's OST for Ready or Not, which is a tactical shooter. It's like a really hardcore tactical shooter. It's super popular. It's not the body cam game, but it's similarly kind of, I believe, like quite realistic and gritty. And it's just got this amazing kind of soundtrack. Lots of dark ambient stuff. And then these long soundtrack tracks that suddenly break out into like jungle or like deep grooves. And some of them are just fantastic, almost like Jesper Kyd levels of kind of groove and atmosphere. So this is Twisted Nerve, which is, I believe, the meth level.
I mean, it's definitely a bop. I want to know who came up with the association between meth and what's that percussion instrument you hit that makes that boom, boom, boom noise? Do you know what I mean? Because it's in the Breaking Bad soundtrack. Straight away, I was listening to this and I was like, oh, the Breaking Bad instrument. And it's just like a weird... It's almost like tapping a glass jar or something. Do you know what I mean? But I feel like it's now just become synonymous with meth.
Well, it's just the effects of like the drugged up effects. And you process it, and make it sound weird. And
no, but just that instrument in particular, like it almost sounds like the glass jars, I'd imagine. Do you know what I mean? That you'd actually have in a lab or something. I just think it's really... I just love the idea of certain instruments being associated with certain genres that are outside the normal. And in this case, it's just like a weird percussion instrument. I like that it's different. And there's a lot of weird just effects, do you know what I mean? They've put over the music that just makes it, like you were saying, just like you're on drugs kind of thing. Like it just sounds a bit twisted and warped. and I like stuff like that.
But does it not fulfil the banger requirements?
Oh no, it does. It does not fulfil the banger requirement. I mean, what's the tempo of the song? We're talking like the BPMs.
The search continues. I might have to come back with another ready or not bop because there's faster ones and there's slower ones. I pick one of the slower ones. So
if you want a banger, find a song called Crack Cocaine instead of Meth, or do you know what I mean? Let's just find Ecstasy. Like, have they got a song called Ecstasy on the soundtrack? What is the game drug related then? Is it you're
like a police tactical team going into various different like hostage situations and stuff?
I mean, there's got to be a nightclub level, right? There hides our banger.
Fair enough. Okay, that's all we've got time for on the GXM podcast. Thank you so much for joining us as we explore the intersection between video games and music. Oh, Matt, I just noticed on the Polygon FM thing, what does it say on theirs? We're spending a week looking at the intersection of music and video games. Please be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on your podcast service of choice, especially Apple Podcasts. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, and Threads. I'm determined to get more time on Threads, but it doesn't always happen. I'm at T Quillfeldt in various places, mainly on X at the moment. Matt is at Mat Ombler. If you've got any feedback, hit us up at gxmpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear from you. Thanks to 8 Beats Radio for amplifying the show. It was produced by both of us, edited by me. Music is by Zach Foster, and show art is by Joshua Klein.